You should. It's super fucking fun, right? I went in hoping it was gonna be like some 60-year-old man that was just gonna be like, yeah, well, this is how it goes, drop him, here we go, right? But it was some 22-year-old lady, and I was just like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do this. She's like, I do this all day. I'm like, I don't want to ruin your day. She's like, no, I'm ruining yours. And went in there, and it was just like, holy fuck. And then she like had to go back in for her watch, and then it was like, and I was so broken by the end of it. She was telling me what she's like, well, you know, your prostate's a little enlarged, but it's smooth, so it's all good. I just didn't even have my pants on. I was still standing there, just broken. Like, oh yeah. Is there anything else? I'll just leave now. How did that come up? I'm not quite sure. Yes. Okay, so what am I talking about here? God knows. All right, so let's look through these and see what happens when we find myself looking through. All right. Okay, Patrick. Oh, sorry. And wait, where? All right. Wait. Patrick, any songs get you through your hard times? Songs in particular. I'm going to belie my hippie-ish ways immediately in these questions, unfortunately. Oh shit, here is a kid. All right. Chipotle. They had the, I had these tofu things here that were excellent, but I had like a Chipotle dip, and that's what it was. So the songs that get me through the hard times, I mean, I like ambient, chill out, really, really mellow. Like, everything I listen to is like some spa thing. Really, it's like, you know, the harps and the thing. And if you've ever heard the Ravi Shankar, George Harrison album, Songs of India, there's a song there called Prabhuji that is absolutely beautiful. And Morbid Angel, Where the Slime Lives, of course. You know, it's kind of a combination of the two, right? It's the two sides, the binary nature of humanity that's fighting for dominance. And neither win, because ultimately you just end up eating tofu with Chipotle and burping it up, and then you're just like, where was I? Don't know. Anyway, Anna asks, why did you break up DTP? Not judging, right, Anna? Whatever. Just curious. You're a great inspiration. Thank you for being you. I appreciate that. I have no choice, which is good now at this age. So why did I break it up? Because it wasn't what I wanted to do anymore, I think. And I mean, none of the decisions that I make professionally make a lot of sense business-wise, which is much to the chagrin of the label and the management and everybody else. Is like, we finally got a trajectory with strapping. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore. They're like, okay, so DTP, we finally got a trajectory and it's finally got momentum. I'm like, yeah, they got nothing to say. But the reason, if I'm being perfectly honest, is because my creative motivations are primarily rooted in trying to figure out myself. And not in, I'd like to think not in a completely self-absorbed way, but just in the sense that I'm trying to suffer less. So as a result of my very loving family when we were young, not being actively encouraged to express emotions in a very overt way. In fact, overt displays of emotions were often met with criticism or anger. And so I spent most of my young years as a very sensitive person trying to quantify what I was feeling, and I would often cycle through every emotion. Like, something would happen, I'd be like, oh, I'm pissed off. No, wait, I'm sad. No, wait, I'm angry. Oh, wait, I gotta pee. Oh, wait, you hurt my feelings. And after like a week of that, I would leave this trail of carnage. It's the same thing that most of my family does. But as a result of that, the convenient loophole for me was music, because it was a socially acceptable way for you to sort of purge all these emotional things. And then because I have been sort of granted this vision for music, that vision unfortunately doesn't include a peripheral, so I just sort of feel it out until it doesn't irritate me anymore. And doing that, I go through all these stages with strapping. I needed to go through that to figure it out. DTP, I needed to go through that to figure it out. What I'm doing now, I need to go through this acoustic thing, I need to go through this. And my objectives ultimately is just, like I think with most of us, like, how do you actualize yourself? How do you get to the point where you're not lying to yourself, you're not lying to others, and then your function as an artist is to basically regurgitate that in a way that provides other people something that doesn't just make shit worse, right? And DTP was very much a part of that process, but it was the polar opposite to strapping, where I thought with strapping I would be ruthless to the exclusion of everything else. And with DTP, I was afraid of that energy, so what I ended up doing was just going the opposite way until I realized that both of them are a part of what I needed to do. In the past, I would tend to make everything really separated, like Ghost, Deconstruction, City, Ocean Machine, Alien, Synkestra, Hummer, DevLab. It was like these things would come out in tandem. But DTP was too polarized for me, so I wanted to try and incorporate everything into one place. God, I talk a lot. Okay, so Steve says, thank you. Yay! Yay, balls are hanging out. Steve, of any musician, composer, artist ever, who would you dream of recording a song with? And who would you consider learning using a didgeridoo? Oh, would you consider learning using a didgeridoo on the next album? Okay, so I'll answer the didgeridoo thing. It requires circular breathing, and I think I'm too lazy to learn that at this point. Because anytime I hear the instrument, I'm like, oh, that sounds exactly how I want it to sound. And I don't have too much of a motivation to do it myself. I'd much rather listen to someone do that, and I think it's great. So I don't necessarily have a drive to do that. I don't want to collaborate with anybody, really. And that's not based on me being an egotistical prick, although there's clearly that. I think a lot of it for me is because my process of writing is so sort of idiosyncratic, and because it relies so heavily on trying to represent to the audience the feeling that I had when the moment of inspiration hit, whatever that moment of emotional significance was in the beginning, whatever that sort of burnt into my psyche, that's what I'm trying to translate. And so I'm happy to have help with that from people whom I work with. But the idea of collaborating with people at this point, I don't have a burning desire to. Maybe that'll change, things always change. Specifically, it gets hilarious for me because my entire trip has been documented. So every time I change my mind, I end up pissing people off. So that's why I broke up DTP. Chris asks, Dev, I'm going bald. Any advice? I'd say, what would be my advice for someone who goes bald? I would try to do as much fucking now as you can, because out the window goes the beans! Out the window goes the beans! No, I would say embrace it. In fact, when I started going bald, it actually happened in one foul swoop. I think I was 23 and I was pushing out an especially hard stool, and I just was like, and it just all fell out. And then a buddy of mine was very critical of it. You know, he got all hammered. He's like, "You're going fucking bald, bro." So that's why I decided to grow the shitty hairstyle, because I was like, this motherfucker, yes, I'm going bald, don't care. But it was really, really a smelly hairdo. And I've been married for as long as I have, and the sexual options end up being the person who doesn't like that smell. There tends to be a motivation that is. So I would say, don't grow that hairdo, embrace it, watch Star Trek The Next Generation, because Picard rocked it, right? He really did, right? I have no advice for that, because would I like to have flowing hair at this point? No, this is actually really convenient. I love not being, having to do the thing and stop talking. George, oh, Paul's about to talk. Check this out. Everybody, Paul Collins, hooded gentleman, says, ladies and gentlemen, when I come back, I will have calmed down slightly. That's always what happens. The first time that I come out, I'm just like, right in the cusp of a manic episode. And then I go away and I come back and I'm like, oh, I feel shame. And I come back and I play a bunch more songs, answer more questions. And by the end, hopefully it ends in something that everybody's happy with. Thank you so much. Go have a beer. Snap. All right, so thank you so much again. All right, so here's these questions things again. Okay. You can really taste the hydrogen. It is good. Is it hard water or soft water here? Softer? It's hard, so you got a lot of lime scaling in the kettles? That smell. All right, so Travis asks, first of all, thank you. Heart. Thank you. Any other Kingdom-esque remakes in the pipeline? Would love to hear Sit in the Mountains. I would love to as well. I think the process of making this music also includes the fact that I'm an imperfect perfectionist, which means I'm constantly irritated by my work. Because it's never right, and it never will be. So I like to envision my trip as I'm recording and trying to redo these things as like a donkey with a carrot in front of him, and he's just wandering like, So there's a good chance I'll re-record everything at some point because none of it's right. But as long as the vibe is there, it's at least in the ballpark. And Physicist wasn't really there for me only because I had gotten a new hard disk recorder, and it was like a Roland thing. And halfway through it, I had recorded half of Physicist, and I was really, really happy with it. And I was like, okay, now I need to back it up. I'll press that button. Nuke. I nuked it all. And so I erased it all. So when I finally redid it, I was just like, fuck. You know what I mean? And that reminds me of a story of, I was on tour and we had a big backstage spread with like tons of like meat and cheese and bread and all these sorts of things. And one of the guys in the opening band, we all watched him spend 10 minutes making a sandwich. He put like the grain mustard on and he cut it all nice and he put like 3 different types of meat and the cheese and everything. And he was, carefully walking back to his seat. And a guitar player came in and was like, oh, and he went, poof. And the sandwich just went, and he was so bummed out that he just like slathered peanut butter on a piece of stale bread, just sat in the corner eating it like a chipmunk. That's kind of how I equate my process with Physicist, the peanut butter and bread thing. So there's a lot of it of that one that I would like to redo. And this is like Anon or Aaron. Is it Aaron? A-N-O-N? Anon? Aaron, of course, A-N-O-N, Aaron. Have you ever done DBT, or you mean like DMT? The duality you keep talking about sounds a lot like the concept of Dianetics. Is that it? Like the Scientology thing? Oh God, I hope not. That'd be brutal. And if it's DBT, no. If it's DMT, no. I mean, I think that I firmly hold to the fact that I know fuck all. And every year that goes by, I know less. And every time some major life event happens that forces me to confront lots of old patterns and issues, I realize that I didn't know anything then either. So anything that I beak off about in a situation like this is purely just mental masturbation. I think the only thing that really means anything in terms of truth is like learning to be quiet. And I think meditation is really great for that, and not necessarily because you're trying to become spiritual or enlightened or anything, but just because it like in that silence is like all the fears start coming up, and then to allow them to sort of have a voice allows you to sort of like reconnect with or evaluate old habits and patterns. And I think a lot of that duality is just kind of part of being a human, right? Like we're all stuck in that whole sort of, we're born a man, born a woman, or oh God, I'm born myself. All right, so no and no. But thank you. All right, so Alan asks, what was the turning point or riff or artist that made you want to be a musician? That's a good question. I think it was the soundtrack for The Dark Crystal. Because Trevor Jones was the guy who did that, and it had such a profound impact on me when I first saw the movie. I was 8. And now when I watch it, it's like I have to have the dialogue off because it does the thing like, as a man, if you're standing at a urinal and you're peeing and all of a sudden, it's called the piss willies. You're standing there and all of a sudden you're like peeing and all of a sudden you're like, right? I kind of feel that way about the dialogue of the movie now. And also I feel that way about a lot of the 70s musicals that had such a profound impact on me as a kid, like West Side Story or Jesus Christ Superstar, Phantom of the Opera. Now when I watch it, it's always Fiddler on the Roof as well. It's like, we're going to the store, we're going to this, and there's people dancing and everything. I'm just like, But I love the music, and I love the intention that Jim Henson had with that first thing where he used all the capital that was significant to make that movie to essentially make a world for him and his friends. And I really found that incredibly inspiring, and the melodies that went along, which is in a lot of songs that I've written. I actually use that melody and Skexis on strapping that was like from Dark Crystal. So I think it was that for me. And what was another song I like? Johnny Cash. I love Johnny Cash because, you know, it was like all Johnny and Cash-ish. Wow, I need a day off. Holy cow. Beck asks, with 3 exclamation marks and a smiley face that is listing to the right, which looks suspiciously like it could be ironic, says, have you ever considered dabbling in Broadway theater? Because you would make a great Phantom from Phantom of the Opera. More of a statement than a question, but just saying. I think the thing that I really enjoy about my career at this point is I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. And I'm such a contrarian, I think, when it comes to anybody telling me how I should do anything, unfortunately. My wife always said if she wanted me to do something, she just needed to insist on the opposite. And I figure that if I was in a situation like that where I was privy to somebody else's vision, and I hate acting. I hate acting. It just, again, the piss willy thing, right? So I think that I could maybe pull it off for a song or two, but I don't know if I could do it with the type of intention that would sell it. I think I would always end up just being a cheese ball halfway through it. Like the Phantom of the Opera is there, right? Who's with me? He's here, isn't he? Ah! I don't know. I got asked to do a Jesus Christ Superstar thing to play Judas, and I don't want to do that. Really, all I want to do is just kind of like wander around towns and drink tea and you know, look at me. That's really what I want to do. And then when I get home, I want to make sure that the family's okay, and I want to pet the dogs and make sure they're okay, and then I don't want them to look at me either, right? So I think that I love doing what I do, and I love the fact that I've been so fortunate to have such a tolerant audience and people participating in it, so it's allowed me to sort of figure this out. And each record, like I said in the beginning, its function has been much more about trying to get through these emotional hang-ups so I can be, I don't know, happy is probably the wrong word, but just, you know, kind of at peace with myself. And all the records and all the music and why it was imperfect in the first place, because none of it's important in my mind. It's all like the exhaust of the process. And so, there, he strayed once again. Elijah and Jasper asks, what has 100 balls and fucks old ladies? Bingo! I know that one. All right. That's a good joke. I love that joke. But my favorite one that I've heard lately, and if you know it, please don't ruin it because I love doing the punchline. What did the pirate say when he turned 80? Aye, matey. All right, that's my favorite. I know it sucks, I know. How do you get 100 Canadians out of how do you get 30 Canadians out of a swimming pool? Time to get out, boys. Okay, hey, we didn't realize you were in that long. We hope we didn't hurt your feelings by being in there, bud. Commonwealth, we are all connected. Ben asked, can you tell us about the gear you're using tonight? Sure. So I have a signature guitar. Yeah. Prestige, I met them in the elevator at NAMM, and they're nice people, and they bought me dinner, and they're in Vancouver, and they were kind enough to make a guitar for me, so it's a signature guitar. Oh, God. Monetizing art, ladies and gentlemen. Awkward.net. So, but then, conversely, I'm using this XFX 3, which is really cool because it's got 4 sets of stereo outputs, and it can also act as a USB interface, so I'm running Ableton. Oh, I got a bunch of text messages. Uh-oh. That's all right. I'm using Ableton, and I'm using the push, which acts in this case as both a keyboard and a sample launcher, and it's running through a couple different chains. So I've got a chain in there that the USB runs through, and I've got an effects thing that I fade in the samples with this pedal, and that hits an echo chain that goes to a set of outputs that are going to the front of house with Paul there that are just the keyboards. Plus I've got another one that is for the keyboards and the Baby Shark stuff that bypasses that chain entirely, so it doesn't go into the effects loop and it doesn't have the effects pedal. The guitar goes into, basically on the Axe Effects, it gives you a matrix that you can basically make your own virtual pedal board, I guess. So I've got the guitar running into a compressor that's got like a 1176 style light compression on it, just catches the transients. Goes into a chorus that's maybe about 8%. And then I've got an alternate chain that goes into an analog delay, about 600 milliseconds with a fair amount of feedback, into a 10-second hall reverb. You asked, I'm going. And then at the end of that, it goes into a ping pong delay with a high and low pass to get rid of the transients. So when I hit a note, it doesn't go ding, 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 ding. It sounds like someone's throwing Smarties at a wall. And the effects go to a separate output to the dry. And I really like gear. I really do. It's fun for me. It's like little puzzles. Right? Ben also asks, ever play acoustic live without reverb or delay? Yes, actually tonight is the first time. Ham. Here we go. First time. This is a world exclusive. Let me see. I can't wait to do this. Here we go.
He's got reverb on there. You can play all of a sudden, now it's back.
So I'm glad it got brought up. So aside from being a jackass, my reason for using all this delay serves a very practical purpose. In a lot of ways, the reason why I wanted to do this acoustic show in limited amounts and in limited places was to reestablish my connection to not only improv, but what it means to sort of actually play music as opposed to replicate it with like backing tracks and samples and all that. And when I write, no matter what it is, whether or not it's Y or the orchestral summer or singularity or strapping or anything, the genesis of all this music is me and a guitar. And I always use the echo, and the reason I use the echo is compositionally, it gives me almost like a sketch out of what it is that I will be trying to achieve. And by that I mean, if I hit a note, the sustain allows me to know what the next chord is going to work with. Right? So as I'm writing, even though lately on the recordings there's a lot less of the echo, I still use it while I'm writing because I could think, okay, this note here, I could say while I'm writing, this is my root, the D, and then whatever this one is, I can think, okay, so I could have the cellos going, and I could have female voices go. So the echo is as much as it is kind of an effect. I use it all the time because it's how I write. So without it, I mean, sometimes I write without it, but it doesn't work for me in the same way. And what's really funny is sometimes people are, oncoming storm. Sometimes people are very critical of it too with me. They're just like, dude, you should just get rid of the echo. And I'm like, or you could listen to someone that doesn't use echo. That's a possibility. But there's a world exclusive, and clearly I can't do it. So, Alex says, be Prague, my friend, 2017, when the keys failed to start at the beginning of your set and you improvised for 15 minutes was hilarious. It was for me, too. Where does your comedy come from? P.S. My friend Phil, is getting married in 2 weeks. Wish him well. All right, so we'll do these one at a time. All right, so where does the comedy come from? Well, I was thinking that backstage, too. I think it comes from two places. One, I think it comes from insecurity. I think that I cover up the fact that I really enjoy quiet with thinking, well, clearly that's not going to work. Clearly I can't just get on stage and just be quiet because, it's like, even for myself, I get bored. I tried it a couple times. I'll eat a bunch of meat. So I spend a year just like eating everything, like Bengal kebabs and silverback donairs and just everything, like the grossest meat I could too. I'd go to the place and just eat something sick. And this is after like 20 years of not eating meat at all. And like my dumps at that point was like Stretch Armstrong. It was just like stuck in me. And I just wanted to see what would happen. And I wanted to see psychologically what would happen. And it was so delicious. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden I started getting horrified by it. And that's what I wanted actually. I was like, no, eat it until you fucking are horrified by it. So I kept eating it. And I'd find like a feather or vein in it or whatever. And then it's like, creme fraiche is just like straight from this sad cow's teat. And I was just like, and I was like, oh. And so that's why I did. But it's so crazy to me that people care what other people do so profoundly, because it's almost like that whole identity politics thing. I don't give a fuck what you eat. I don't care if you smoke. I don't care if you drink. I don't care if you're liberal. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care. But because I think that the whole process for me artistically is finding what my truth is. And it's different than yours. And I think that having a mutual respect for what people do is essential to that. But conversely, I think it's very important as an individual to know unequivocally why you do what you do. Like I remember when we first had kids, I was like, I saw, baby come out of a vagina. I was like, oh my God, that's what sex is. It's reproduction. That's fuck. And I was like, oh, I'm gay, for sure. Clearly, I'm gay. But then a lot of it had to do with there was postpartum depression on her side, and I was just, I'm still like, right? And then, and I went up to all my buddies. I was like, hey, I'm gay. And they're like, you're not gay. And I went up to a bunch of friends who were gay, and I was like, I think I'm gay. And they're like, you're not gay. And I was like, well, why aren't I gay? And he's like, well, when you were a child, did you look at the little girls or did you look at the little boys? I was like, well, little girls. She's like, you're not gay. You're traumatized, and you'll get over it once you start getting laid again, right? And that's what happened. So I thought it out, and I went through it, and then when it went away, I was like, oh, I'm not gay. And then I went back to my buddies, like, guys, I'm not gay. And they're like, jeez, Deb, just keep it to yourself. But my point to that is, I know I'm not gay. You know what I mean? And my friends who are gay, I'm like, of course you're gay. That's fucking awesome. Of course you're gay. But it's great to know, because then there's no fear of it. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same thing with food for me. It's like, there's people, like my father, I went off and on the meat thing, and then, I go over for family dinners, I'm like, I'm not gonna have that now. And he's kind of, well, you think you're too good for meat? And I'm like, fuck no. It's fucking delicious. It's just now I'm just totally rooted out by it, and that's my own trip. Maybe I'll get over it in a year, who knows? But just do what you do, but do it because it's what you're supposed to do, and really call yourself out on your own shit, and that makes the music fucking. All right, so thanks. Alex, while each of your endeavors represents certain chapters of your life, are there any songs or themes that you would like to revisit? Not particularly. I think I recognize in hindsight what my motivations were, and that's my objective, is more about recognizing that rather than fetishizing it. Because in the past, I felt like my identity was so heavily invested in what I did that in the event that I was no longer able to make music, my value as a person would cease to exist. And I think that had a lot to do with a type of low self-esteem that motivated me to do it in the ways that I did in the beginning. But it doesn't make me feel like I want to revisit anything, which, you guys here are clearly people that, for the most part, have been listening to what I do, so you're much more tolerant to what I'm doing tonight than perhaps the average public would. And so it's hard for me to articulate that to them without them just being like, what, dude? Why don't you play strongly again? You know what I mean? So I work through it so I can move on, and then once it's done, it's done. And that's great. Ollie asks, my two favorite people on earth are Stephen Fry and Devin Townsend. Any chance of a photo after the show, please? I promise I won't get an erection. Makes one of us. All right, so. Okay, so I'm going to say this, and I hope you understand, and I hope you take it with the intention that I'm trying to put across. Towards the end of DTP, I was really shutting down, and I didn't recognize the reason why. And I think this past couple of years has allowed me to sort of reflect on it in a way that answers this question. The same sensitivity that allows me to do what I do in a way that hopefully is of emotional significance to others is the same thing that I have a real hard time not absorbing energy from people. And whether or not that's empathy or narcissism, it doesn't really matter at this point. I'm trying to establish patterns for myself that are rooted in taking care of my needs and understanding where my parameters were, because I appreciate so much, and please believe this, I appreciate so much the ability to do this and the fact that so many of you have supported this for so many years, that if somebody's like, I want this signed, I'm like, I will sign anything. I'll take any picture. But what ends up happening is that I would stay after every gig and I would do that. And it would be so much fucking energy, even though it's good energy. For the most part, like people would say, okay, well, I had an emotion, and it's not just me, any artist will go through this, I'm sure. Someone say, you know, I had an emotional experience, or somebody in my family died, and this song was important to me. My reaction to that is just like, holy shit. And so as an artist, what I want to do is I want to be present enough for them to know that I'm participating in it authentically, yet also protected enough on an emotional and psychological level that I don't take that home with me. It's the same reason I can't watch horror movies. You know, when I was a kid, I used to try and challenge myself to watch, but I can't. When I see things that are super sadistic, it like sticks with me, and it really bothers me. So what I've tried to do with this acoustic tour is I've tried to impose some parameters on for myself that are in opposition to what I would like to be able to do, which is to give to everybody everything they want. So what I would suggest tonight, if it's cool, is if there's anything you would like signed, Paul at the front house has been kind enough to say, if you drop it off with him, I'll sign it. And I promise that the next time I'm in Perth, I will do a full meet and greet. But if you wouldn't mind, for the sake of what I'm trying to achieve for this empath cycle, it's in my best interest to try and learn to establish some boundaries, because I've been terrible with that, and it almost put me in a position where I didn't want to do this anymore. So I apologize, and I promise I'll do it in the future. And the fact that you brought up an erection has nothing to do with that. Pat, can I have a hug? I'm going to give you a virtual one in light of my last answer, and I will, trust me when I say this is really difficult for me just to not be like, come on up here, Pat, let's get a hug, yeah, right? I've mentioned this before, but they talk to autistic children who, a lot of times autism manifests in children as ways of not being able to understand social cues. And as a result of that, sometimes their lack of awareness of social boundaries become such that it has to be taught. And one of the ways that they teach autistic children in some places is that they teach them that they are surrounded by a blueberry, like a big blueberry. And you want to make sure that you don't get into other people's blueberry, right? Or you don't want other people to be in your blueberry. And my blueberry is fucking, one end of it's in Vancouver, and it is getting bigger all the time. And that's being perfectly honest. If I see people and they want a hug, absolutely, I'll give them a hug, absolutely. But even when I come home, my wife, who I've been with for 30 years, and my kid, who I would take a bullet for, they say, Daddy, and they give me a hug, and I'm like, hey, how you doing, buddy? He thinks it's funny because, and I think a lot of it's the job too, because it's like I'm trying to remain present while defending myself, and not defending myself, protecting myself. And we're at a hotel, and he was like, Dad, I want to sleep in the bed with you. And I'm like, oh, dude, I can't stand sleeping in beds with people. It's like, It's super weird, other than conjugal visits, which lights need to be off. Like, I mean, it's like really weird. So, but I love him and I do anything for him. It's like, come on, buddy, yeah. And so he told my wife the next day, he's like, Dad built a wall of pillows between him and I that night. And I saw him in his sleep, he was trying to scale it. You know, he's like coming over in the middle of the night and I keep pushing it up and I'm like, so I will give you a virtual hug and I as a human being to another human being, I love you. But as a physically just trying to get used to the fact that this spacesuit I'm wearing here is like got a massive blueberry around it, I'll thank you to hug Paul instead because he's a huggy guy, aren't you, bud? That's a sound. Right. Life, or Leif, like safe with an L. Dev, please provide some words of inspiration to continue writing music after 7 years away from it. I'm just going to say one more thing about that last thing. I think it's healthy to learn your boundaries in the same way as learning what works for you in terms of diet, in terms of all the things that you choose and don't choose, things that work for you in terms of media, all these things. And learning to have the wherewithal to say this is what works for me and this doesn't is very difficult for me. But I think it's part of this whole empath cycle, so thank you again. Deb, please provide some words of inspiration to continue writing music after 7 years away from it. I think that the goal of an artist, and this is romantic because I'm clearly about to write a Cock symphony, truly, because I am equal opportunity when I come to how disgusting I think both sexes are. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to romanticize women. I used to think of like, all women were like a goddess, and they could do no wrong, right? But then I started making friends, like legitimate friends, and there's like, no, we're fucking gross, man. Like, you need to understand that all this stuff that you think about is like, we think about it too. It's just like, so yes, and vaginas. I would say that the goal of an artist for me would be to run out of things to write about. That would be awesome, because I think that on some level, being an artist is a mental illness. The need to like have it like out there, to have it validated, whatever that is rooted in is like super strange. And I like to think that eventually I'll just be a gardener and I'll have nothing to write. And people are like, you got any record? I'm like, nope. So maybe that 7 years away from it was all the inspiration that you need, so when you get back into it, it's not the same pressure. Maybe that fact that you spent 7 years away from it, you've learned to control that obsessive need to create, and what will come out of you at that point may be very shocking, and I would say go with it. Maybe it's something that you don't expect at all, but the first things that start coming out, actualize them in their entirety, finish them, even if you think the idea is shit, because behind those ideas are where the good ideas lie, in my experience, which is why I have so many demos that I can put out as bonus tracks, because I get it out of my system. By getting it out of my system, it doesn't roll around there anymore, and then I can just proceed. So I would suggest the same. Okay, Jack, not really a question, but I made a music video to Think Beyond Things, and I want to say thanks for sharing it on your Facebook page. You're welcome. I remember it. It was very cool. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. And there's Jack's fan. Thank you, Jack. Dave, thanks, Dave. Your music has been so amazing and prevalent in my journey since SYL. Lookout 2003. Lookout 2003. Do you feel like your music is part of a special spiritual journey, as your album seems to aptly named Soul Deep? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think I'm clever enough. All I do know is that I follow the inclinations where they lead. And they lead me to places that have been really fucked up and really healthy. And there's a certain aspect of like spirituality, I guess, that's with it. But I really resent religion, and I really resent people that think they have answers. And I think that the more I do this, the more I am more satisfied with the silence, because in that is like a certain amount of surrender to the fact that I don't know shit. And through that silence comes a lot of fear, and that's where the music comes from. And so sometimes it's horror, and sometimes it's love, and sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it's beautiful. But I think if you allow yourself to be a conduit without identifying too much with what comes up, then ultimately your nature is going to come through. And I believe that my nature and the nature of people in general is more fearful than evil. So somewhere in there is the truth, and I don't fucking know. But I'm having a great time doing it, and I suggest that Lord of the Fries has a hot dog that I had last night that was a little cold, but it was really good. So you should probably have one of those. Aaron asks, in the Genesis music video, what's the significance of you sitting there with headphones on while just listening? Yes, thanks for making music. Woo! Hear it for what it meant to me, which was a passageway through a bunch of random thoughts. And I didn't want the random thoughts to be interpreted as like a schizophrenic statement, rather than allowing these things to come to the surface and not judge them, and have the thread between them be, for the sake of Genesis, for example, 128 beats per minute. That was the thread for that one. And having the video where I was listening to it hopefully implied to people that that's how I think it should be digested, rather than, at a club or in your car or something. So I guess that was my vibe. Wow, these are serious tonight. It's great. Matthew, can I have an autograph? Oh, fuck! Oh, man, if you give it to Paul, I swear I'll sign it. And Paul really loves it. And do you guys understand why I'm doing that? It's not, you do, right? You don't, please don't take it as a sign of disrespect at all, right? Okay, all right, thank you. You too, buddy. It says, Hail Ziltoid, I agree. Chris, my wife may possibly have a baby while you're playing tonight. Does that make me a bad husband? What do you guys think? Oh, Chris. Oh, man. Okay, well, my buddy had the burger, and it had like a cheese sauce on it, and it looked as good, but there's something about burgers that always seems to be the default to like veggie food, It's like, all the vegetarian options, some fucking gnarly burger. And what was really funny as well, those burgers now that are kind of the thing with the brioche buns, they just look so gory. It's like, how would you eat something like this? These big, stiff, stale-looking buns with like a big patty of fucking dude on it, and like a bunch of jizz. You know what I mean? I hope that the baby's healthy, and I heard that you circumcised here, so if it's a boy, you might want to talk to Paul, the hooded gentleman, because he may offer a different perspective on that. And how's that for an evasive answer? Good luck with the baby, man. Woo, no sleep till bedtime. Sam asks, would you ever release covers? For example, Freebird. I've done a bunch of covers. I've done Judas Priest covers, Coffee Cobb covers. I did Venga Boys recently. When I first heard We Like to Party by the Venga Boys, it made me cry, and people hate that song, but I feel it's important for me to quantify my emotional reaction to that by saying that I interpreted the fact that they say the Venga bus is coming and everybody's running as an analogy for the apocalypse. And because it was so happy, I just thought that was like the most devastatingly dark thing. It's like, the Venga bus is coming and every New York to San Francisco. I was just like, it gave me goosebumps just thinking about it. So I covered it, and now I have Ziltoid going, yes, and in the background there's just people like screaming, and So yes, I do read these covers. Okay, Rhett asks, Rhett, is that really? That's awesome. Damn it, Scarlett. Wait, Frankie Scarlett? I don't give a damn. No, that's Rhett Butler. No, is it Rhett? Rhett. It was Rhett. I love that name. Good Rhett. Can you please give a shout out to volunteer firefighter? Let me try and enunciate it first. All right. Can you please give a shout out to a volunteer firefighter? Huge fan that is missing tonight because he volunteered to deploy to Queensland to fight fires for free. That'd be cool. His name is Will Fogarty. Fuck yeah, Will Fogarty! Fuck yeah! Now that is a real awesome thing. Right on, Will. You're fucking awesome, man. Please be safe. George, does Steve Vai like poop? He's a good buddy, though. We are good friends, and he was always just perplexed as to why I would do that. But in my defense, at the age of 19, when I worked with him, I could not articulate my discontent when it came to the disillusionment that I felt by being deflowered by the industry in such a profound way. And it had nothing to do with him. It's just I had illusions in my mind about what it was, and that everybody clearly used music as a emotional cathartic release in order to try and find ways towards some sort of sense of self-actualization. But I got to LA and I was like, oh, it's all for shit. And I couldn't articulate that at that point, so I took a shit everywhere. Like I shit in his guitar case, I stuck phones up my ass when I was on the Tonight Show, and everybody was like, why? And it was only now that I'm able to say, well, actually. So I think at the time he was really, really, really confused. But we're good friends now, and I think I still confuse him. But at least now it's like in a much more sort of benign way. Scott B asks, thought on your Project Echo tracks. I wish I could do vocals for those. I still have lyrics for them, but every time I try and do it again, it just doesn't hold the same sort of emotional interest that it once did. But I'll get around to it at some point, maybe. Who knows? I mean, ultimately, like I said in the past, just drink it. Ultimately, like I said in the past, the music serves a function that is really transient. It's not meant to be like this eternal musical statement. It's just the thing that happened, and then I forget about it. Then I go do another thing and I forget about it, and I do another thing and I forget about it. There's certain things that I revisit because I like it, and I think it would be nice to present it in a way that was more in line with what the emotional motivation at the beginning was to be. But it's just a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? It's like all the music just is shit that happened, and then ultimately it's like if I can get to the point where at the end I'm like, chilled and doing my thing, then whew, mission accomplished. All right. Kendall M asked, what do you think of the new Dark Crystal show? I've gotten halfway through one episode and I don't know. I have a hard time with it, but I think it's my own bias because I don't want to sully the thing that the first thing meant to me. Plus, a lot of what was important to me about it, although it looks beautiful, was Jim Henson, because his intention I thought was beautiful. And however, is it good? Yeah, I heard that. And in fact, I felt the same way about the new Blade Runner, but I really liked that, actually. I thought the ending was really cool, and there's a couple of scenes in that I thought were just profoundly beautiful. Like after the first one where he's like, he killed the guy in the maggot hut, but when he's flying over the city, I was like, God, that's really, really tastefully done. So I think that there's a certain aspect of that as well that I could probably adhere to Dark Crystal. Aaron asks, my best mate, Bud. Oh, so those aren't two separate things. I like to think my best mate / Bud, but I think his name is Bud. My best mate, that was rude. You did that on purpose. Why? Because you're trying to diffuse the seriousness. Don't do that. My best mate, Bud, couldn't make tonight because it's his anniversary. Just wondering if you could throw him a shout out. It's Bud and Bianca. Hopefully I'll be recording. Are you recording? Are you recording Aaron? Is Aaron still here? Yeah. Yay! Yay! All right. Bud and Bianca, married for a long time, working it out. Bud and Bianca, starting with B's, not alliteration, but similar. It's called consonants, isn't it? When two words start with is it consonants? Alliteration. Bud and Bianca, a little alliteration. All right, thank you. Happy anniversary, folks. I have one more page, and I'm going to play another song, and I'm going to bugger off, and my party night will continue with all that tea and bathing and all of that sort of shit. What? All right, here we go. Hello, hi Paul. We have to shut up now? Do I have to? I'm going to pound through these. Just watch. Okay, here we go. Tom, will we get any more casualties of cool? Yes. Phil, could you please release the lyrics for Total Collapse from the demo disc? Love you, dude. Don't know what they are. I think if I went through them, I would remember. Oh, I put them up on Twitter at one point. I will try, but I have no idea. Alexander, when performing Strapping and Lad songs again, how does it feel to be doing music from such a different time in your life again? Thanks for being the artist you are. It's inspiring. It's great because at one point I viewed the motivation for strapping as something that was an aberration in my creative identity, but I've realized recently that it was a part of me that was almost post-traumatic, and as opposed to trying to quell a part of me that's clearly a big deal, anger is a human function, that to learn how to articulate accurately at this age is a very healthy thing. I feel like I'm inviting in a part of me that I have pushed aside for a long time, and that sort of self-compassion is in line with empath. My throat's going. Corpse Grinder grinds corpses with APOM says, will you perform a live version of Soul Driven someday? That song is much more production based than it is anything else. I maybe would, but it is of no immediate burning desire to do so. I appreciate that you like it. I appreciate that someone who grinds corpse also likes driving souls. My friends, this has been a fantastic way to end this run. I appreciate being able to come back in the second half and be more in line with what I felt I wanted to be from the beginning. Thank you very much for everything. Thanks for being patient with me in terms of the meet and greets on this run. I promise I'll do another one. I've got one more song for you. Thank you so much. I can't thank you.